Okay, so now we are up to what is known as the Carolingian Revival. And the one person to know with the Carolingian Revival is Charlemagne. So here we have Charlemagne's empire. So Charlemagne is centered in Europe here in what we would say is France today, right? And he starts to expand his empire, conquering, right? From the Kingdom of France. And over here with the Holy Roman Empire, the Pope, who is in charge of that, begins to get a little on the worried side that he is going to be conquered by Charlemagne. So he goes to Charlemagne and he makes a kind of a deal with Charlemagne. And he says, I will crown you king of the Holy Roman Empire, but I will retain the power of the Pope. And Charlemagne agrees to this. So on Christmas Eve of the year 800, the Pope crowned Charlemagne king of the Holy Roman Empire. And by doing this, Charlemagne then can make the proclamation that he has been chosen by God to be king, and he is rightfully the person that should be ruling these lands. So you see, he eventually is able to control a big, humongous section by 814 of Europe. He's an interesting character in history. He really wanted to unite Europe and bring peace to Europe, and he does this through trying to spread Catholicism. He wants everyone to be Catholic, as he makes this alliance with the Pope, but he himself was Catholic. He wants people to go back and look at the Romans and really start to learn from the Romans. He never himself learned to read and write, but when he died, he was attempting to learn to read and write. And by saying like he wants all this stuff and being peace and everything, this does not mean that at times he was not a ruthless ruler. He was. He killed lots of people, but he really wanted to unify Europe together and try to bring peace to much of it. So we have this equestrian portrait, and at one time we thought this perhaps was of Charlemagne, but now we think it maybe probably is Charles the Bald. We know it's a Frankish king because of the mustache. And if you think for just a second, this is the first time I've shown you a piece of sculpture in a couple hundred years, because we're at the 9th century here. And again, this is Charlemagne, or people right around Charlemagne's time, looking back at the Romans, being inspired by Roman architecture and Roman art. And so now we have this 3D, three-dimensional piece of sculpture. We're not so worried about iconoclasm anymore, the copying of the image, of the real world around you. And so we have this equestrian sculpture. And who can we compare this to? Well, Marcus Aurelius, the image of Marcus Aurelius that we saw. And really, this is the last great equestrian sculpture that I've shown you before this, which was circa 176 CE. Right? So, I mean, we're talking a few hundred years here between these two. It's a big stretch of time. However, there's some general things that we can say are the same between them. Both of the horses have one leg lifted up as though they're walking. This would indicate that they're going into battle. Both of them sit not in armor or something like that, but more of a, approachable kind of dress. Although he's definitely the king with the crown. He's more regally dressed, where Aurelius over here is in a simple toga. He's more trying to portray himself as the commoner, the approachable commoner, or siding or sympathizing at least with the commoner. I'm not sure the ball here, what the reference is to that he's holding, but we can really make this comparison, although we see that the Roman depiction of the horse and the figure and everything is much more realistic than the depiction here of our medieval sculpture. So Charlemagne is also looking at architecture, and he has a palace chapel design. So this is the palace chapel of Charlemagne, and it's located in Germany because, again, his empire was that large. He has control of most of what we consider Germany today too. And this is constructed between 792 and 805. And if you look at this, the inside of this should remind you of Byzantine architecture. And in fact, he is looking at San Vitale in Ravenna, Italy, which is the northern part of Italy that Justinian had set up as the western capital of the Byzantine Empire. So you'll notice, we've got these arches, we have our ambulatory here, our walkway, our clerestory, the marble, beautiful marble work, just like in this, and mosaics. So he's really trying to copy the Roman extension here, which of course is the Byzantine, right? Because we remember, I hope, that the Byzantine was the continuation of the Roman, but on the eastern side of the Roman Empire. So next I'm going to show you two different interpretations of Matthew the Evangelist. So if you know your story of Matthew from the Bible, it said that God came and spoke to him, and he writes down what God says, and this is part of the Bible. So here we have Matthew. He's shown as a saint here, and he's writing down the words of God. Notice how flat it is. He looks like he's about to tumble out of the space. There's really not a lot of depth in this, that he could sit in it. In fact, the table is kind of turned towards us so that we're able to see the book. So it's still very strange in the way it is constructed here and the way it is painted. It's ink and color on vellum. But he looks pretty serene. He looks pretty concentrated, focused in what he is doing. And we compare this to another interpretation of Matthew the Evangelist from the second quarter of the 9th century. So they're very close in time. And here we have God speaking to Matthew, but he's trying to write the words of God as God is speaking to him. And he's trying desperately to keep up with what God is saying and write everything down. And you can see kind of the frenzied look on his face, that he's having a difficult time doing this. And maybe he realizes the importance of what is being said to him. And so again, the space in this is very shallow. It looks like he'll fall pretty much out of the space, especially with this weird kind of shadow behind him. But here we do have some kind of depiction of land, of a landscape behind him. What also makes this image seem to move or have a lot of movement in it is all the line work. So we have the lines in the background, and we have the lines in his robe that he's wearing, and even the lines down here on the ground. So these things help to give this movement that the other did not. The other was much more serene. Even, we could even say, like the frame. If you look at the frame in comparison to this, and then the frame of this has this kind of diagonal to it. And diagonal lines are always going to indicate lots of movement. So I'll stop here for this one and pick it up with the next video.